All right. Hi, guys. Welcome back to a podcast that I sometimes name, that I sometimes don't. Today, I'm joined by Calvin Booth's burner, the Nuggets draft guy, CT. How you doing today, man?
What's going on, everybody? Hey, Asher, thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Always great talking, Nuggets and draft, with you. So looking forward to topping on the pod today.
Yeah. So basically, the Nuggets have done jack and shit this offseason. We've seen them trade up for Deron Holmes, trade out of Reggie Jackson, and then ever since, radio silence. What do you think of just the nothingness that is the Nuggets free agency period so far?
Yeah, I mean, I know the timeline. I'm sure you've gotten in your mentions as well. Like this, the timeline has been pretty irate with Booth off season. There's always somebody complaining and you know saying like, what are they doing? And is there anything going on? But I think for now, the roster is almost filled, basically, so it's kind of the inflexibility there is something to watch for. I think they have like about 3 roster spots remaining, just kind of waiting on
Yeah,
Blacko's offer. I know that was rumored that he was going to get a deal, and apparently Booth was down in Europe, talking with him about a contract and maybe scouting Dario Saric or who knows, maybe he pulls rabbit out of the hat and he signs Mario Hezonja because apparently he was rumored to want to come back to the NBA. So I mean, yeah, I just think the Nuggets are kind of limited with their flexibility, but yeah, I mean, I would have liked them to sign another minimum guard, whether that was a Delon Wright who went off the board for a minimum deal. Chris Dunn, I know that deal's kind of being held up for now. Maybe we'll see if Westbrook is the guy to come to the Nuggets. Maybe that's still the holdup, and but I think they could have probably signed uh, maybe a more flexible point guard option. Uh, but I think Russell Westbrook wouldn't be the worst option, if they were to get him. But yeah, I mean the inflexibility also with some of the hold up with some of the moves. I mean, probably is why a lot of the Nuggets Twitter is kind of mad about what's going on.
yeah. I am also like, come on, what are we doing? Because you're in an inflexible position in large part due to moves that Calvin Booth has made. Like when he
Hmm.
came into the team, he had the 2027 pick he could have traded. He had the 2029 pick he could have traded. He traded both of them. I think the 2027 move is going to end up being good because that was the Peyton
Hmm.
Watson move. But
Right.
trading another first round pick for another young guard in the next draft, basically kneecapping any pick flexibility you had remaining for Julian Strother, is an interesting decision in my book.
Yeah.
And also trading, I mean, second round picks aren't too valuable, but moving 6 on draft night when, I mean, who knows? Maybe you could have gotten Deron Holmes if it didn't come out that, he's going to the Nuggets basically. Because then you saw him start to climb up some mock drafts. You never saw him go too high, but you always knew, hey, Nuggets are probably going to have to trade up for him at this point. They did. It cost them 3 second-round picks. Not the highest, you know, price in the world. But once you
Right.
get that and also the Reggie Jackson move, which Reggie Jackson, say what you will about him, was an okay option last season. I
Hmm.
had my gripes with him. I don't think he was the best defensively. I don't think he was exactly what they needed at the backup guard spot, but he's probably better than Russell Westbrook for the Nuggets because the lack of shooting off the bench unit is going to be a big talking point if Russ is there because he only adds to the lack of shooting. And then you have like just 3 seconds out to get a expiring $5 million contract off the books. Which it's
Yeah.
like you shouldn't, if you were going to end up doing that, you shouldn't have given him the player option for the second year. And also, we're in a position where they can't really do much salary wise because Zeke Naji is making $8 million a season now. So they're
Fifth
in a,
highest player on the team.
yeah, which is insane. You have like the core four, and then everybody else. 6 of them are on their rookie extension, on the rookie deals. You have Zeke, who's on 8 mil, and then you have like DeAndre Jordan and whatever. Like you have a bunch of guys,
Right.
and they're really banking on these young guys being good. And we were talking earlier. I'm writing a piece on it. That's not how championships teams are normally built. It's the exact inverse, really. And you don't have this 20-year window that the Spurs did because you didn't win in Jokic's second year. Tim Duncan won in his second year. You won in like his, eighth? Something like that?
Around there.
Yeah. So you are on a clock. It's probably a slightly longer one because he's going to age really well in all likelihood. But you don't have as long of a window as you think you do. And I think the just kind of sitting on your hands when you have the best player in the world and letting KCP walk for 22 mil, which is not an outrageous amount. Like DeAndre Hunter is making more than him next season. It's not this absurd contract. If it was like 27, 30 mil, I understand that. I think that's a little much for KCP, but 22 over 3 years, that's completely reasonable to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, I think you made some great points there, and if I was Booth, I would have signed KCP to that deal for $22 million. I don't think that's, like you said, an outrageous number. I think it's actually pretty reasonable. And also too with KCP, you know, if you see Christian Brown having a good third year, you could say, you know what, maybe at the deadline now we're going to trade KCP and get some assets back. I'm sure for KCP you'd get a first rounder, no doubt about it. You know, I think you would definitely get a first rounder, maybe even another rotation piece as well. So it's a lot of it is that the asset management now. So Nuggets have basically kind of are basically barren at this point with assets. You know, which is an issue, obviously, unless, like we've been talking, I think their last kind of asset that they want to use to get a difference-making piece would probably be to trade Peyton Watson, I think. And I don't think, you know, Booth is going to want to do that since that's his draft pick. So, you know, they're in a tough spot right now, flexibility-wise at least. Yeah, I mean, I would have signed KCP. I think his on-court production is still valuable. And like you said, if it didn't work out as well and, you know, Christian was taking that leap, then you could have traded him and you could have gotten more assets back in return. And also, to actually, we talked the other day, another angle with the Christian deal is that if he plays well this year in the starting lineup, which, I mean, if he stays healthy, I mean, I would assume he takes a pretty decent step up in production. He's going to be a year ahead in negotiations as far as the extension is concerned. So he'll probably get more money this year, you know, because I think next summer he's going to be eligible for that extension. So, you know, they're probably a year further along than they thought, maybe in the grand scheme of things, that, you know, they could have had Christian come in and start after KCP was dealt next year, and they could have gotten him on a more flexible deal for the Nuggets. But, you know, we'll see what happens, you know, going into the year. But yeah, I mean, the flexibility is a concern for sure. I personally think the Nuggets are going to be okay. And I say okay, meaning that I think Christian could step in for KCP in the regular season, and it wouldn't be too steep of a drop off in the regular season, at least. I think in the playoffs is a different story, you know, for sure, because KCP is a better offensive player, no doubt, better shooter, more versatile defender, I think, at this point. But, you know, I just think as far as the starting lineup's concerned, I think they'll be okay. But you are down another playable rotation player when you look at the hierarchy, right? The Nuggets have basically had their 5 guys last year who were mainly playable. And I think Christian was their best playoff player last year. I don't think that's like a hot take or anything. I think he was their best playoff player last year. He played really well in that Wolves series for sure. He was better than KCP in the Wolves series, but that's one playoff series. You know, there's other series that KCP was great in. You know, the Heat series last year, he didn't shoot the ball well, but he was great in that series defensively, whether it was on Jimmy Butler or guarding anybody else. And, you know, he was also great in the Suns series too, against you know, Devin Booker and KD. And that lack of versatility now the Nuggets have in the backcourt might be an issue where, like you said, now they're relying on more second and third year and even rookie players now. So one of those guys gonna have to pop. That's probably Calvin Booth's calculus, that he needs one of those players to actually hit, which, I mean, Brown's a hit. I'd say Watson's as close as you could get to another hit. You know, Charlotte obviously had an up and down year last year with the injury and some of the shooting concerns. And, you know, I've made my stance pretty clear on Tyson and Pickett. So it's, you know, it's tough. And I think, you know, like we see now, if they're able to sign a Westbrook in free agency, or if he gets waived or however else they get him, and they sign like a Sarge or a Tice, I don't think it would be the worst offseason in the world. But, you know, definitely doesn't feel great at the moment.
Yeah, because you're betting. See, I understand wanting to have good young players. There's a difference between trading up for trading a 2029 first for like a lottery pick, and what was Strother, the
29th.
29th? Yeah, trading
29th, yep.
trading the 2029 pick for the 29th overall pick in a draft is ludicrous to me. I'm not using this as a slight against Julian. I think he could still be a fine role player this season and even better in the future. But to use a pick that gets rid of, like, because of the Stepien rule, basically 3 of your picks that you maybe could have traded in a move to get a 29th overall pick for a guy that, I mean, didn't shoot well from 3 last season, made 12 made field goals after January 1st. Be it a lot of that was because he missed time with injury. He was up and down. It's hard to be consistent in an inconsistent role. But that leads to this situation where you're sitting on Jalen Pickett as your backup point guard who struggled to bring the ball up the court the last season. You're relying on Hunter Tyson potentially as like if Vlatko goes down, like he's been one to do in the past.
Yeah.
Suddenly Hunter Tyson is your backup 4. You're relying on Deron Holmes, who both you and I really love, but also he's still a rookie big,
right.
It's not as volatile as a rookie guard, but that's still a rookie that you're relying to be good, or you have to play the corpse of DeAndre Jordan. So you get to a point where you have a bench unit right now of Pickett, Strother, Watson, Vlatko probably, and then Deron Holmes. Vlatko is the most experienced player on that entire unit, and he's played maybe like 100 games in his NBA career, because he
probably more than that, but I mean it's not extensive for sure.
Yeah, and even in the games he's played, most of them have been garbage time or not impactful minutes at all. He did have the stretch 2 seasons ago where he was good for a large portion of the season and then got hurt, and then when he came back he couldn't hit the side of a barn. So you're looking at Jalen Pickett to be your ball handler. You're looking at Peyton Watson probably to do some creation. His offense was far behind last season. He made a huge jump from his first to his second season, and he's probably going to make another jump this season. But you're banking on all these guys to pop when they were all drafted. Pickett in the second round, I think 32 overall. Hunter Tyson, 37 overall. Peyton Watson, 30th overall. Julian Strother, 29th overall. Deron Holmes, 23rd overall. Those are not picks that typically hit for immediate contributors in a playoff setting, especially when you're at the level where you're trying to win a title. The average age of the Nuggets going into next season is 25.8. The average years of service on the bench is like 2 or 3. There's just not enough veteran depth. Because speaking about the Spurs, because I was looking into this earlier, the average age for most of the Spurs championship runs, like considering only the rotation players, was around 28 to 30, depending on the year. The Nuggets right now are going in with 25.8 as their 10-man rotation.
Yeah.
And outside of Jokic in the core 4, it's like, rookies and sophomores. And that's just not an acceptable thing to me, because I do think it's the Conkeys being cheap, but also I think Calvin Booth is fine with that because he believes so much in his guys. And I think that's being a little overzealous, because if your guys pop, then guess what? Then you can move on from your vets. Then you can kind of cheap out a little bit. But until that point, you're relying on the unreliable. And it's just kind of insane to me that this is what has become of the 2023 roster, where it was the starting 5, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, Christian Brown. It's kind of insane to me that that's what's become of that roster.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think, we look at Christian in that rookie year, he was great, and that was a big hit by Booth. He used all the avenues that he could to improve the roster, and he hit on a rookie at 22 that made a difference in the finals, which is pretty unheard of. So I would give him an A+ for that offseason. Then if you look at what happened after that. We kind of look at some of the deals after the championship. That was a bit of an issue.
Yeah.
So, if you see, oh, someone's ruining the Nuggets downfall. They said, I'm just reading the comments now. But I do think that some of the issues here is that that Reggie deal was kind of a problem deal. And I know that was kind of a handshake with the buyout. You know what I mean? Where it
Yeah.
was, they bought him out, and then that was kind of a agreed upon to bring him back the next year. I mean, that was reporting. That's nothing that like any of us have heard or anything. That's kind of just public knowledge. Um, and then the Zeke extension obviously was not good. And it's surprising too because that wasn't Boots. At least we know of that wasn't Boots' pick. That was
Yeah.
Conley's pick at the time. So, and he was trying to get ahead of it, right, and trying to pay his guy early. But it backfired in that instance where it really did pay off in the past. You look at guys like Jokic getting paid early, and Murray got paid early, right? Gary Harris got paid early in his tenure, and you see, MPJ got paid early, right? And then he had his injuries, but at least I think at the least MPJ was able to back up his play on the court, and he contributed to a championship. So, I think those two moves, the Reggie move and the Zeke move, were really sunk moves because limited the Nuggets as far as getting additional veterans from last year, which was an issue. Um, and I think too, if we talk about the project draft pick plan, right? I think Booth went too far into one direction. If he had Strawther, uh, Christian, Peyton, and Duran, I think that's perfectly fine to take 4 roster spots on younger players because the roster's 15 players and you have 11 other guys. Your 5 stars and then 6 other guys could be veteran guys, right? I think that's a good mix actually to have. You have a developmental pipeline, but then you also too have veterans you can rely upon to play meaningful minutes. And I think, like we said, he's gone too far into that direction of having all these draft picks, Pickett and a Tyson. I don't see what warranted them getting guaranteed multi-year deals. Other than that, he had a lot of faith in those guys. Maybe they could be used as salary fillers, but I think at this point, maybe that would be the time to kind of look into that.
Yeah.
But we kind of at this point don't see anything as far as any veterans as like a backup point guard. Pickett's the backup right now, and we have Trey Alexander as the third string guy on a 2-way, which I'll admit I'm higher on Trey Alexander than Jalen Pickett.
Yeah.
But again, we're talking marginally here, and we're talking young players instead of veterans. Where Bruce obviously shined, and we talked about this the other day. The Bruce signing was a very lucky signing, and I want to give Booth credit for addressing the need and going after Bruce and getting him, but it was malpractice by the rest of the league for not signing Bruce to a heftier deal than what the Nuggets got. And him leaving, I don't think was indicative of the front office. They literally couldn't bring him back. But I just think that they didn't replace him as far as like trying to get any other players where the veteran could have stepped in and maybe taken some of the burden off of Murray and at least in the backcourt, right? I think that was the issue where you couldn't play Reggie with Murray due to defensive woes. You couldn't play Zeke next to Jokic. Again, that inflexibility compared to the championship run really hurt the Nuggets in the playoffs. And actually, like next year, I'm more of a fan of what the front court looks like, at least. If they get Sarge, I think that would be a decent regular season move. But again, Blacko coming back, and I know a lot of people are saying, he's hypothetical and whatever. He's at least a veteran at this point, and he has the ability to shoot the ball, and he's a pretty good passer. With Nuggets in the front court, they lacked last year. They had no front court shooting at all.
Yeah.
If you look at DJ, you look at Watson was playing a lot of the 4. Zeke as well. So I think Blacko will help in that department, and Holmes too. I think Holmes coming in is gonna help. He's a rookie, of course, but I do think as far as his skill set, he's different than what the Nuggets have had. You know what I mean? So I think if you play a Blacko and a Holmes, I think that could actually be a pretty versatile combination. But yeah, like we mentioned, when lean too far into the young player movement, and I think there's still time to pivot off of it for sure. But if they could get a Westbrook, maybe another veteran guy, and then like Saric or Daniel Tice, I don't think it'd be the worst.
Yeah.
In the world.
Yeah, I think they need vets, because I'm of the mindset that Holmes and Vlatko, I think, will be fine. I'd prefer if you get a Dario Saric in over a Vlatko just to compete. Like, I'm not saying Vlatko can't play there, but
Right.
he is largely hypothetical to me. So I'd like to have at least another body that could be there to compete with him. But if you look at the rest of the bench, man, it's pretty dire. Like they could have gotten probably DeLon Wright.
Yeah,
they
that was
like
the
they
one that I was mad about.
yeah, they could have given him the TPMLE if they wanted. If they really wanted to, they could have given him that because that's what they have access for. They let KCP walk to have the flexibility to sign a DeLon Wright. Like that's the sort of players that are going for around the TPMLE now, and it's just you let KCP walk to avoid the second apron, but you're going to end up there anyway. Like, unless you're setting the precedent that you think AG can walk next offseason because he's not extended. And I'm hoping for an extension this offseason. I don't want AG to hit, free agency. Mm-hmm. But if they don't and they let him hit free agency, the precedent so far is that they let these guys walk. And if they see Deron Holmes as the 4 or as a 4, maybe Booth says, "Oh, Holmes, yeah, no, he's good enough to fill it for AG." When AG is like an all defensive sort of level guy and has the best synergy with Jokic of any player that we've seen, probably besides Jamal. Like
right.
the chemistry between the two is not something that is seen very often. So if they let AG walk, I think that's complete malpractice.
Malpractice completely. Yeah.
Like I think this offseason and last offseason largely has punted. I think next year and last year. Like last year, they could have probably gotten to the title, and this is with Jamal heavily struggling because of the calf strain. With them blowing a 20-point lead in Game 7, they literally should have made the finals still with the malpractice that was committed last season of going 0 of 3 on rookies in their rookie year, not moving forward, just in their rookie year 0 of 3. And also, if you're going to spend picks on a Pickett who is 25 already and a Tyson who is 24, you want those guys to be able to play immediately. They were not anywhere close to being able to play immediately. Pickett struggled to bring the ball up the court. Like this, it's just punting on a top 20 talent of all time in his prime when you already won a title with him. It's just ludicrous to me that this is what they've decided to do. And you said there's still time to move off them. There is still time, but they've shown no indication that is the plan. They have shown zero indication that they want to move off Pickett. They've shown zero indication they want to move off, any of the young guys. And Peyton Watson, I personally probably wouldn't move off of unless you got a great deal for him. If you called the Bulls and they were like, "Hey, we'll give you Alex Caruso for Peyton Watson," guess what? I'm packing his bags yesterday because Alex Caruso is like a top 5 role player in the league.
Right.
It's just insane.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well. Just kind of like we said, the Nuggets just don't have a lot of guys off the bench at this point that we could fill in for a starter, and that was the issue last year is that Malone really rode the starters. And I mean, for good reason, a lot of it was. I do think he could have experimented a little more, but I've seen that as well where, Malone has gotten some of the kind of the blame in the hierarchy, which I don't think he's blameless for sure, but I do think that at his disposal, he didn't have a lot of options. I would have liked to have seen him have more trust in Christian, I think, playing, like we said, instead of a KCP with 4 other starters. I think that's definitely valid. Playing Watson in place of an AG at times. Let's see how that kind of went. I think now that development has to be fast-tracked now because KCP's gone, right? So Christian's going to have to play with the starters. There's no other option unless they get somebody else. You know what I mean? I've seen some people say that Gary Trent may be on the market, but I mean, I'd probably would rather start Christian anyways, though, over Gary Trent.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I actually don't think Gary Trent would be a bad option at this point. He can shoot. He's pretty decent defender. I mean, it wouldn't be bad if they were to get him on the MLE or whatever else kind of they have left. But yeah, that's for me what comes to mind. And I think I actually like some of the options that they have right now. Christian playing the 2, I think is going to be good. Of course, playing with Jokic is always a positive lineup, but I do think Christian brings things to the table in which he's going to shine. Really good offensive rebounder for a guard, pretty tall at 6'6", athletic, slasher, good defender. Obviously not the shooter KCP is, which is a problem because the Nuggets offense was the issue in the playoffs. but I do think Christian brings a lot of good things to the table where you're not going to be sunk that KCP left, you know?
Yeah.
I actually would like to see some Watson at the 2 as well. You know, I think you could play
Yeah.
a little bit bigger of a lineup, and Peyton showed a little bit, of creation ability this year. You know, attacking off the catch, creating offense in the mid range a little bit. Like I don't think it would be a bad move there either. If they don't get another guy off the bench like that, but yeah, I mean, the bottom line at this point is that there's too many draft picks for a championship team, and I like that balance of having some veterans and the rookies. You know, we're draft people, right? So we like having rookies on the roster. No, it's true. We like having rookies, in the pipeline, and I think it's good that you have that flexibility, right? You don't want to just be a veteran team, which I get Booth's point. You know what I mean? You don't want to keep recycling veterans and them leaving and in that aspect, but there comes a point where you just can't rely on all these guys where it's not a difference making player, right? You see, like Tim Connolly and the Wolves, they went up, albeit I'm not really the highest on Dillingham there is, but they at least it was a move where at least he said, we're gonna do it and we're gonna go up and get Dillingham. If you could have seen like the Nuggets, for example, could have went up and got. Not saying this would have been a great move, but if you went up and got a Devin Carter at 13, right, that would have been the move, right? To say you're going to get a guy in the lottery, this guy's gonna come in and we're gonna play him immediately and see if he can be a difference maker because he has that kind of appeal as being a lottery pick. So,
Yeah.
And again, I'm high on Holmes as are you, right? So I mean, it's I think Holmes gonna come in and be a difference maker off the bench and not be like some, averaging a double or anything we're talking about, but at least he's gonna come in and be a contributor and he's versatile, right? He can play with Jokic, he can play without Jokic. He can stretch the floor. Like we said, the front court didn't have that last year. So I think the balance needs to be more in alignment between the veterans and the rookies. And at this point, we haven't seen that yet. It's been mainly that one way, and that kind of screwed the Nuggets in the playoffs because they didn't have any other options, and their starters were gassed at the end of a Game 7 that they were up by 20 in, and maybe if they had another versatile piece off the bench, they could have won last year. They could have gone back to the finals. It's entirely possible. I personally don't think they're that far off, the Nuggets, especially going into last year and how they played. I don't think they're far off, but I do think KCP leaving does, leave a lot to be desired now. And there's more questions than answers than what we saw last year.
Yeah, because with me, I like Christian. I was high on Christian coming out of college. I liked him as a rookie. I've been pro Christian the entire time. I don't think he's ready to be a starter. I think he's a very, very good 6th or 7th man on a championship team, which is a great player. There's no shame in being a really good bench piece. But also, I think KCP's screen navigation is going to be sorely missed because Christian is a great defender, but he's not nearly the screen navigator that KCP was. He's more of a, bump into guys, be physical, then get around screens. And KCP did do some of the bumping stuff, but they're two very different defenders. They're two different styles of defense. And that's why you like to have both of them, so that if you go against an Anthony Edwards, we can throw out the physical defender. If you go against a Steph Curry, who, by the way, KCP held to 37% shooting in his matchups against last season. Albeit the NBA.com matchup data is wonky a lot of the time, but he held him to, I think it was 7 of 24 or something like that, 10 of 24. It was a low percentage, especially for Steph Curry. So, those sorts of guards, KCP was the guy for. And now we're replacing KCP with not even a shot creator because Christian Brown is not a shot creator. He's a really good slasher, off-ball cutter. He's a good attacking off closeouts, but he's not going to be creating his own shot very much. And now we're in a conference where Alex Caruso, Lou Dort, Shea, Kaysen are all on one team. We're in a conference where the Timberwolves absolutely battered Murray, and we didn't add secondary shot creation this offseason. We could have gone up and got someone in the lottery because we could have given the Spurs the exact same package as the Timberwolves. 2031 pick, 2030 pick swap. If we were going to do the young player thing, which I do not want us to do, but we're seemingly committed to it, I don't want us to do it to the extent we're doing it. I do want a developmental pipeline. But to the extent that they're doing it now, it's just stupid, in my opinion. It's organizational malpractice. So, I was high on Dillingham. We could have gotten up and gotten Dillingham. We could have gone up to get a Bub Carrington, who I was really high on. If we're going to do the young player thing, trade up and get actual quality young guys. Duran is a great young player. I think he'll be great. But outside of that, you've never traded up, really. You've traded future draft picks to trade into the late 20s and the 30s. Like, trade up into the lottery. Get an actual guy. I don't think it's that difficult, you know?
Yeah, I think too, now, like you said, with the screen navigation part, I think the Nuggets going to be pretty susceptible to pull-up shooters. Now with KCP off the roster, Lillard was a guy that KCP had a good track record against, and Steph Curry as well. Even a guy like, Anthony Simons, who's not obviously the level of player that they are, but at least, KCP was able to kind of stop those types of players that were able to be really good pull-up shooters, and I'm pretty interested to see how Christian does faring against those guys, because he obviously didn't have the usage or the minutes played to really have that large of a sample against a Lillard or a Steph or somebody like that. Like, I'm curious to see how it goes. But then if you look behind Christian, like, who else do the Nuggets have at this point? Because they're down defenders. If you go to the championship season, they had KCP, they had Bruce, they had Christian. Last year they had KCP and Christian, and Peyton, you could say it too if you want to lump him into that mix, even though I think he's more of a wing defender than a guard defender. Now Bruce is gone, KCP is gone, so it's just Christian. It's just Christian. So again, I do think if they add Westbrook, I think Westbrook actually is a pretty decent defender. Again, I don't think he's great, but he's at least a body. He's physically 6'4", right? He's hypothetically at least someone you could throw out there to try. My guy was Delon Wright, because I think if you would have had Delon Wright, good defender. Again, he's not a shot creator by any means, but at least he could run an offense capably. He's a veteran. He could capably run an offense. He can create a tiny bit, and his shooting has improved a lot, over the last couple of years. So that was my guy in the free agency period. And there's a couple of guys left that are decent options. Maybe a Fultz, which again, his offense is not playoff credible, I would say, but at least I'm just throwing out the option. I'm just
I know. I know.
There's at least he's Dennis Smith would be another guy I think would be a decent option. And if you want to replicate to see like this is what Bruce is, this is like Dennis Smith is probably close as you can get to that. Big time slasher. He headed to the rim at ease. Really good in transition. Good at the point of attack defensively as well. Very quick. Again, the 3-point shooting obviously is a detriment for sure, which that's a lot. That's basically everybody on the market at this point. Westbrook, Fultz, Dennis Smith. I mean, I don't know of any other, option that they can get unless they're going to go get a trade where if you can get like a Javon Carter or somebody like that. But even then, still, Green? I mean, it's very bleak at this point, But like for me right now, I would get Dennis Smith like right now, regardless if Russell Westbrook comes. I would get Dennis Smith and say, you know what, we're gonna put you on the roster, even as a third string guy, and at least have that option. I just don't. The Pickett thing for me is like, and I hate to like, we're a draft analyst, right? So we don't like to be hyperly critical of a player's skill set or anything like that. We do like to talk about their overall game and some of their critiques a bit, right? I just don't think Pickett is a fit for what the Nuggets need when it comes to the bench and it comes to him playing with Jokic, right? So. For me, I would probably look to deal one of those guys, Tyson and Pickett, and just try to to pivot now at this point, because you already have 4 guys like we mentioned that I think are going to be good for the Nuggets. I think you could credibly play them in the rotation this year, but anything past that, it's just tough for me to kind of be on board with. So I think right now, like Dennis Smith would be my number one option to get in free agency. Like I said, even if Russell Westbrook was to get traded here anyways. So I don't think you can have enough backcourt defender / creators. You know what I mean? Especially next to Murray, seeing like what happened in the playoffs where he got completely, swarmed by the Timberwolves defense. There was no other outlet, right? So I think having some of those skill sets would be helpful, at least at this point.
Yeah, like the thing to me about that is, I agree with you. DSJ is probably my first option at this point, because it's like, dog, I don't want to put up with the spacing of a Westbrook or Fultz with Peyton Watson, with, if Vlatko isn't hitting his shots that month, if Holmes' shot doesn't quite translate enough, that's like potentially four like 31 to 32% 3-point shooters.
Yeah.
That is not good enough for a team that already struggled with 3-point volume. They lost probably their best catch and shoot guy outside of Michael Porter. So, DSJ, if Chris Dunn's stuff falls through, those are guys that can at least set the table for Murray off ball a little bit better than a Jalen Pickett. Because I straight up don't think Pickett is an NBA player. I think he's a good G League player. He'd be fine overseas. I don't think he is a
NBA Gillespie outplayed him this year.
Yeah. Yeah, Gillespie was legitimately like pretty okay in the games that he played. If we kept Gillespie as like the third point guard, I'd have no issues with that. Like, he's small, yeah, but he can run an offense, I think, better than Pickett. He can at least bring the ball up the court. Yeah, he's a better shooter than Pickett. So it gets to a point where it's like, who's going to trade for these guys, though? That's my thing about trying to pivot. Who's going to give up any value for a 25-year-old second-year player who has 3 years of guaranteed money left? I think 2 of them are team options, but still,
Yeah, 2 years left, I think. If like this 1 year already was gone. Now I think they have this year and the next year, I think. So they'll be free agents not after next season, but the one after.
Yeah, but like by the time, if you accept his 2 team options, he's a restricted free agent. He'll be 29 or 28. That is obscene, especially for a guy who is not shown to be an NBA player, at least, and in my mind isn't going to develop to that. Hunter Tyson is even more of a what pick because he didn't address any specific need on the team. He doesn't do anything particularly well from what I've seen. Like, there's no theoretical to him. At least Pickett is like theoretically sort of like Andre Miller. Like, Hunter Tyson is just sort of Thomas Welsh too. Like, I don't know what he's supposed to be on this team. And you also gave him a guaranteed contract, and he's going to be, I think he's 24 already, going to be 25 during the season. It's like, what are we doing? Because who's going to give up anything for them? You're not going to get seconds for them probably, because they can go and draft someone way better now with those picks. And it's not like they're contributing either to a win now or to a development roster, because they're too old to develop meaningfully more in all likelihood, and they're too bad to contribute anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you could really get for them. My thinking was that you could have attached Reggie with those guys. At least got to take those contracts on with Reggie. You know what I mean? And that's another move that we didn't even talk about. Dumping Reggie with 3 second-round picks. It's more of a result of that the buyout didn't work, I think, than actually, because a lot of people back in 22, 23 were saying, the Nuggets don't have a backup point guard. They can't work with Bruce as the sole backup, you know what I mean, to work. So, I mean, that's why Booth signed Reggie. Obviously, then it was a result of the Bones situation not working out either. But, yeah, at this point, like the Nuggets last year just kind of tanked a lot of roster spots where, DJ, I think, is a good veteran, but he's not an everyday player. Vlatko, obviously, they kept on the roster because, I mean, it's pretty clear now that they wanted him back. They would have just kind of waived him, I think, if they didn't want him back. And then you look at, Zeke obviously was basically unplayable, and then Tyson and Pickett didn't play any minutes. So that's like 4 to 5 roster spots that you look at that you could have brought in a veteran minimum guy, or like even like a non-guaranteed guy to say, can those guys fare a bit better than what's already on the roster? So it's mainly about the mismanagement of the margins, right? And that's the issue, is that in a championship window, especially with the second apron stuff, right? You need to hit on all the margin moves, and Booth hit on all the margin moves in that first year, and then last year I think was not a good offseason after the championship. And I will say it is a pretty unique circumstance coming off a championship, and pivoting as far as what's going on here. So. I don't want to put like the entire blame on him, and I think there's obviously a lot of offseason left, but these moves have to be at least make sense from a hypothetical standpoint, and there needs to be veteran guys, at least 2 more veteran guys. If there's not, then I think we could probably be very, very critical of kind of the front office's MO here, moving forward into the offseason. So
Yeah, because like say what you will about Reggie, I think I already said it. He averaged like 10-4 this past season. He played all 82 games. He was available. He was an option. He was probably a good locker room guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and in November, like in October, November, he was great. It's just that Murray missed a ton of games, and they played way too. Like he had to play way too much for what his body could handle. But yeah, just they need more vets. They need someone other than Jalen Pickett as the backup point guard. Because if we go into the season with Jalen Pickett as the backup point guard, I think you can like say goodbye to a top 3 seed probably. Because I still think they have the talent to get to a top 3 seed, assuming they add another backup point guard. But Murray has historically missed games. And if you're asking Jalen Pickett to be a starter for 15 games, that's not going to work. In a conference as tight as the West, as close like in standings as the West is, because it was close the entire season until like the last month. There was like 5 teams that maybe could have gotten the 1 seed. And then it came down to the final day who would get the 1 seed. In that sort of conference, you need to hit on every margin move that you can. And Jalen Pickett would be a miss on every single level of a point guard, in my opinion. I don't think he's good enough to be a backup. And with Murray's health concerns, I damn sure don't think he's a starting caliber point guard. Monte Morris went for the minimum. Monte knows how to play with a lot of this roster. You could have brought him in. If you pay him the TPMLE, I'm sure he comes. You know, you could have paid DeLon Wright. You could have paid so many players. But instead, they have done nothing. And we're waiting for Westbrook to maybe get traded to us. And if not, to maybe get waived and then go to us. Like, it's not – they're taking too much of their time. They're resting on their laurels too much. And I have very little faith in the front office going into the season. I do think that the straight-up players will be fine. I think Christian will be a good player next season. I think he was a good player last season. I do think you have a lot of drop-off in the spacing, and I think that'll clog up the two-man game. But I do think Christian will be fine, but at that point you're losing another body in an already thin rotation. So that's sort of our thoughts going into the season. I think this is a good place to kind of, cap it off. Don't want to take up too much of our nights, but thanks for coming on. For those unaware, you can find CT. I'll link his Twitter in the description once this is a VOD. Does a lot of draft stuff, mostly Nuggets focused, but if you want draft stuff, he's your guy. And does a lot of good stuff. You can find that all on his Twitter, I'm pretty sure, right? That's the spot.
Yeah, everything's on my Twitter. Yeah, I write a little bit on Medium when I have a chance. But thanks for having me on, Asher. It's always great, talking Nuggets and draft and NBA stuff with you. So appreciate it. It was a good conversation, and we'll have to look forward to see what the Nuggets do in the coming days, or we'll see how the offseason shapes here. So thanks for having me on.
Hopefully anything. No problem. Thanks for coming on. And then for those watching, like, subscribe, all that stuff. And have a great rest of your night. Have a good one. Peace.